Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Enrico Dolcecore, and welcome to another episode of Living a Full Life, where each and every week we come in with great health topics to help you live the fullest life possible for both you and your families. If you've been tuning in recently, we just finished a great cycle or series of sleep, and today we're going to talk about endorphins, chemicals, hormone system, and the general things that will ease us out of the sleep discussion that we've had. And today's topic is about melatonin and, more importantly, the circadian rhythm. You may have heard of this before. We're going to dive deep into what the circadian rhythm is and get a deeper understanding on how our body's clocks actually have been programmed to work for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So we talked about pillows, we talked about mattresses, we talked about sleep aids, we talked about how to get and set up our rooms and our homes for proper sleep. Now, it's about the chemicals and what works on for sleep overall. So how does sleep happen in the body? It happens with the sleep-wake cycle. In other words, the circadian rhythm that you may have heard of before. The sleep-wake cycle is the two cycles the body goes through when it's falling into sleep and when it's getting up for the day. So those are the two cycles. It's an internal clock, if you'd like to put it that way, on the 24-hour clock. And what we do is we cycle with light exposure. So daylight is what dictates this cycle of day and night and sleep and wake. And that's why we are more alert during the day and we're more tired during the night. That's called our circadian rhythm. So there's some chemicals involved in this. Hormones play the map everything in the body. It's how the brain pretty much controls everything, is through protein chains and hormones. That's how everything is controlled. So if we wonder how the brain is communicating with the body, it's not a different entity. The brain is part of the body. It's not mind and body, it's body. The body encompasses a brain and encompasses everything, and it's one unit. We have to stop looking at these things as two. The brain needs the body to send messages back so it knows what messages to send and back and forth. So hormones play that big role, and maybe we'll dive into hormones next. And that's where we will build up into this fall and end off 2024 is maybe the hormone system and get a deeper understanding on how hormones work. So let's talk about chemicals that are directly related to sleep. I was going to title this podcast Melatonin, but it's deeper than just melatonin. Melatonin is one of the chemicals in there. So we're going to talk about a couple of them: melatonin, adenosine, GABA, and cortisol. Those are the four major players in our sleep cycle. So melatonin is produced in the brain, in the pineal gland. Melatonin helps signal the brain that it's time to sleep, typically increasing as it gets darker. It just has a natural increase and release from the pineal gland during the evening as the sun starts to set and the dark and the light goes away. So that's what signals us to start to get sleepy, or should. And that's what happens to our children. It's what happens if you ever want to understand how healthy bodies work. Typically, look at our children. They are the ones that will have the most energy you've ever seen and crash the fastest you've ever seen in your life. It's because their systems are in tip-top shape when it comes to that. So that's great. Adenosine, you may or may not have heard of this, builds up during the day. It creates a sleep pressure that makes you feel tired. So as adenosine starts to build up during the day through activity, you get this buildup of this sleepy hormone that's in our body, and it starts to trigger the melatonin response. And we'll get into this in more detail. GABA is a neurotransmitter. It calms the nervous system and helps maintain sleep during the night. And cortisol, known as the stress hormone, everyone talks about cortisol when it comes to stress, it should decrease at night to allow melatonin to rise. So all these play a rhythmic cycle during the day. Cortisol will, start to go down at night and come up in the morning, and melatonin will start to rise at night and come down in the morning. So they play a role and have to have this nice balance in order to get these deep cycles of sleep. So the circadian rhythm let's start at midnight for most people. What ends up happening around that time is where we fall into our deepest sleep, is right around midnight. We get our lowest body temperature happens about 4 in the morning. So if you are sleeping that typical 10 to 6 pattern is what I'm describing here. You start to get ready for bed at 9:30. You fall into your bed at around 10. You fall asleep before 10:30. And by 4:30 in the morning, you have your lowest body temperature just after your deepest sleep as you're coming out of REM. As you wake up in the morning, This is where you have your sharpest increase in blood pressure. That's where it should happen. And that's why we have this cortisol debate as when cortisol starts to increase, our blood pressure increases. But what we've actually found through the literature is they work in unison. It's not one directed to the other. So blood pressure will start to increase there, getting you ready to get up and conquer the day. By 7:30 in the morning, about an hour after you've awakened, melatonin secretion permanently stops, completely stops for the day. And then that's where we have our highest alertness is between that 8 to 10 a.m. is where you are the most alert and the most charged. Does that make sense? The battery's the most charged there. As we get through noon, we have the best coordination in the right afternoon. In the afternoon, about 2 o'clock is our best coordination, best time to play sports, hand-eye coordination, get moving, play some tennis, whatever it is there. That's where we have our best coordination for movement. And then our fastest reaction times happen in the evening. So it's great for all these professional athletes that have games that start at 7 p.m. And it makes sense as far as training during the day, getting ready during the day, and then playing the most intense is because the best coordination happens there as we have a balanced hormone system during the day. So the best muscle strength and cardiovascular efficiency happens around 5 p.m., right around dinner time. And then we get another high blood pressure. The highest blood pressure readings typically happen around 6:30 p.m. for most people. So this is all just medians. Please don't, I'm not picking the clock and saying 6:30, 6:35, it all depends on when you wake up and go to sleep. But this is just on a typical 10 to 6 sleep pattern, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. wake is what's happening there. Then what happens, and many of you notice this, especially over the age of 40, is the highest body temperature happens in the evening. We start to get, we call it hot flashes or get warm, but we all get this from puberty onward is an increase in body temperature at about 7 p.m., a couple hours before going to bed. Melatonin secretion starts at about 1 to 2 hours after sunset. So let's just say 9 o'clock for most people here during the year on average, depending if you're in Canada. Sun goes down at 4:30. I guess melatonin is going to start at 6:30, but in the winter, and then in the summer, melatonin isn't starting until 12:30 in the morning. So it depends where you live and what's happening there. But this is just a guideline on the circadian rhythm and everything that's involved with it, with melatonin, cortisol, our alertness, both mentally in the morning and then physically in the afternoon and the evening, and how these hormones play a wonderful orchestra of coordination. Very cool stuff there. So what gets us to sleep and what keeps us asleep is melatonin's ride. Melatonin helps initiate sleep, but doesn't necessarily keep you asleep. It peaks at night and decreases towards the morning. So melatonin plays a role. And we'll get into the melatonin usage. If you've never used melatonin before, melatonin may be very beneficial for you if you're getting into sleep problems. It's typically related to stress. I'm going to give you the answer to the end of the podcast right now, in the middle of the podcast, and tell you the answer to disruption in sleep comes from stress. When stress builds up, it throws off our entire hormone system, and it's not just cortisol. But if you've never used melatonin before, introducing low-dose melatonin at that evening time has actually shown in the literature to help people get to sleep easier, which is fantastic. So melatonin's ride can work on that way as well. GABA and other neurotransmitters, along with serotonin and other brain chemicals, help regulate sleep cycles and ensure a restful night's sleep. Your brain produces this as needed. And then during the sleep stages, we go through NREM and REM sleep. So deep sleep or sleep and then deep sleep, and how they are essential for rest, recovery, and memory consolidation is in that REM sleep. Literature shows we need about 45 minutes to 90 minutes of deep REM sleep per night to fully help with rest, recovery, and memory consolidation. Memory consolidation may be new to you, but in neuroscience, it's been around for a long time. People with better REM sleep can restore and repetitively go back into memories easier. So academia, this is a great tool for students, is to get good night's sleep. You'll be able to cite and from memory the information that you learned both in the recent past and the far past as well. So it's pretty cool what ends up happening during REM sleep, but it's also for healing. As a chiropractor, I tell my patients, We got to make sure you're getting good sleep in order to maximize recovery and healing in the body. That's where essential fatty acids play their roles, come on in and rebuild our cells and our tissues. It's what happens there. Even our brain has to heal at night as well. So if you're thinking about melatonin, you're like, man, my sleep is off. Tried everything, change the pillows, fix the bed, dark room, noise machine. You've done everything we've said, right? And you've seen some specialists and you've checked your breathing and you're not, you don't have sleep apnea and you're breathing well and your O2 is good and all the things we talked about. What can happen with melatonin uses is it's useful for those with delayed sleep phase disorder or jet lag is typically where it's used. It says, hey, just get that when we're traveling around the world and we change time zones and you take some melatonin, it can pop you into that place that you're at time zone so you can sleep at that proper circadian rhythm. And it just helps support the circadian rhythm adjustments. It can be beneficial for shift workers and people that travel and non-habit forming people as well. So melatonin introduced into the system can for a short term, trick the body and when to start the rhythmic sleep cycle. So very useful right after dinner, 7 o'clock, start taking your dose of melatonin. If you've taken melatonin in the past and it used to work and it doesn't work now, consider that a good thing. Your body's adapting to this, which is good. You don't want to be able to just accommodate everything forever. Your body gets used to it. So you should actually stop the melatonin usage and try and find improvement in your sleep or decreasing stress really is the answer to this. So overuse and tolerance, it happens very quickly. Some literature shows within 60 to 90 days, 2 to 3 months, you can build up tolerance to melatonin. So it's not a long-term solution. You can slowly increase the dose over time and stretch that to 6 months, 9 months of usage. But typically at the year mark, people are getting used to their melatonin. They're taking the maximum dose and it's not really impacting sleep anymore because they haven't directed and fixed the underlying cause of stress. So over time, relying on melatonin supplements might make the body feel less efficient at producing its own melatonin. So we don't want that. And melatonin everything has side effects. When you don't introduce things into your body and then all of a sudden you flush it with a chemical, any chemical, a hormone, a steroid, anything that you put into the body, it can have side effects. It can create headaches, dizziness, drowsiness, daytime drowsiness. So there are some side effects. Long-term use of melatonin over time is not really in the literature. We don't have any good long-term studies because typically all these studies fall apart after a year because people are showing no real improvement in sleep after that 1 year mark. So there are no long-term studies because there's really nothing to show as far as improvement. Should we continue to study it? Yes. What do we have to change? I'm not sure. Maybe changing people's stress levels and then following them for 5 to 10 years and seeing how that goes might help. And dosage. It's so peculiar for every person that we don't even have a good dosage scheme for people. It's not based on weight. It's not really based on age. So melatonin dosage is a kind of play as you go type thing, which is always difficult when it comes to dosing anything. So those are the risks and the side effects, very minimal side effects with it. So melatonin, I say, is very safe, which is absolutely fantastic. So improving sleep without melatonin. How do we do that? Which is probably the better answer. Sleep hygiene, it plays a big role. So go back to some of our other podcasts that we talked about sleep and keeping a cool bedroom, keeping it as dark as possible, calming down before bedtime. Typically, many of us are looking at our screens right up to the moment of sleep. Some of us go to bed with our screens and stare at the phone as we're trying to go to sleep. This is really throwing off that light cycle that we talked about, the day and night cycle, which is the circadian rhythm. It's based off light. Your brain is very primal. It's very Paleolithic. It only knows sun and dark and maybe fire. That's really it. That's what it's been engraved into our DNA over thousands of years. So we only play with the sun. Now we've introduced all these technologies, flashlights, cell phones, tablets, televisions, fluorescent lighting in the home, LED lighting in the home, light bulbs, all these light sources that our brain really doesn't know if it's sun or not. Is it light or not? The brain's registering it as light. So decreasing screens, turning off the lights, dimming the lights, 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime. Not going to bed with your phone can drastically help you with sleep and getting to sleep. So that's one. Dark, cool rooms is what works for most people. Natural ways to boost melatonin. How about that? How about we use natural ways? Exposure to natural sunlight during the day and minimizing light exposure in the evening are the best ways to boost your natural production of melatonin, and exercise as well. But during the day, we have to get that UV exposure. That's what it is. That's the uniqueness. So LED light bulbs do not have UV. Fluorescent light bulbs do not have UV. Blue light does not have UV. None of these have that UV wavelength that you need, the ultraviolet, that only really comes from the sun. There are ultraviolet lights on the purple spectrum that you can use, but who wants to sit in front of purple light all day? But that can mimic UV, but that is where the sun plays its role. Going outside for 30 minutes and just letting the sun kiss your face plays a huge role in this. It comes from other things like the third eye and all the other things you may have heard in natural science. So nutrition and supplements as well. Well, we're big on this. Foods that boost melatonin production are walnuts, pistachios, tart cherries. They help. Those all are just natural foods that you can maybe use after dinner to snack on, a handful, and help your body just naturally produce melatonin on its own. As you do this as a nightly snack over time after your dinners, it can really help. Magnesium, B6, and even GABA itself can help promote better sleep as well. So lots of cool stuff there about melatonin, about sleep. I hope that answers some of it. Melatonin's not the long-term answer to sleep solution, but if you've been recently getting into some sleep problems, stress, there's an election coming up, there's hurricanes everywhere, there's weather, there's inflation, there's lots of stress happening this year. 2024 has been fun, hasn't it? If it is affecting your sleep, you'll notice that melatonin may be a great addition to your supplement regime, adding it after dinner, 1 to 2 hours before sleep, at a low dose, and seeing it has to build up, and seeing if it helps you through the nights get to sleep easier. That's the key. If you can fall asleep easier, it gives you a better chance to fall into that REM sleep. Difficulty falling asleep, what ends up happening is you have this longer time of trying to fall asleep, which gets you into the NREM cycle, but not into the REM cycle, because by the time you're getting into the REM cycle, it's time to wake up, because you've only had 3.5 hours of sleep because it took you so long to get to sleep, and now you got to wake up in 4 hours. So that's where the problems lie with producing natural hormone in the body. Your brain has this cycle that it needs to follow. It just needs the time to do it. That's the trick there. We can't speed things up. When we get into trouble, and I've seen this over the last 10 years in hormone replacement and in the hormone clinics, is people are getting into trouble trying to speed up these hormone systems synthetically. Who would have figured? Add kerosene to the fire, you're going to create a bigger blaze. And we're seeing that. And a lot of the natural doctors, even medical doctors in the hormone field, in the primary care field, are kind of holding their hands up when it comes to hormone therapy, because they're just seeing all the patients with side effects afterwards. So your primary care is going to agree with me. Your natural doctors are going to agree with me that we got to be careful when we're messing with it. Then we're going to talk about, maybe if I can get a couple great experts on some of these future podcasts this fall, we can do a sex theories series on how sex plays a major role in our rhythms as well, in a healthy way. We're going to talk about the hormones with sex, nothing about positions or anything like that. We're just going to talk about how hormones play a role there as well, and sex education as well. These are things that I think are not talked about very well, and hormones are kind of baffling, and sex itself is kind of baffling, and how it works and why it's important. So maybe we'll get into that stuff as well. So we'll keep all this cool information going for you. I just like to find the right experts to get on here, because I don't know everything. But there you go. Melatonin. Is it good? Yeah. Is it bad? Not really. If it's wearing off, it's because you've been taking it for too long. So maybe cycle off of that for at least a year. Try some of the other tips we gave you, and hopefully you have some sweeter dreams soon moving into the future. Stay well, stay healthy, and take care.